11 days. That is how long Lila was gone. 11 days in Key West with 3 women who packed more swimsuits than common sense and posted enough sunset photos to make the Atlantic Ocean file a noise complaint. She came back through Seattle-Tacoma with a tan, a canvas bag full of key lime candy she would forget in the pantry, and a secret she had not managed to leave behind in Florida. Before I tell you what she brought home, drop a comment with where you are listening from and what time it is there. And if you like slow, cold payback from people who should have known better, subscribe to Dad's Silent Justice. It costs you nothing, but it helps us keep these stories coming. I did not know any of that yet. I was only happy she was back. That is the detail that bothers me more than the betrayal. If I am telling the truth, I was standing outside baggage claim at SeaTac on a Friday evening with my rain jacket folded over one arm, watching strangers reunite under fluorescent lights. And I was smiling like a man who had eaten frozen lasagna for dinner 5 nights in a row and was genuinely glad to see his wife. Lila came through the sliding doors laughing at her phone, one sandal hanging from the side pocket of her carry-on, her hair lighter from the sun and her face pink at the edges. She kissed me fast. Polite. Almost grateful. On the way you kiss someone who has picked you up on time rather than someone you missed. I noticed it. Structural engineers notice stress points. We are trained not to ignore small shifts. The drive back to Queen Anne was ordinary enough to be insulting. She told me about the guest house with the peeling blue shutters, the breakfast place on Duval Street, and a boat captain named Ray who apparently believed every sentence required a rum joke. I laughed where I was supposed to laugh. She talked too quickly. I filed that away too. Because a marriage is full of sounds. And after 9 years, you know when one note is off. The house on Queen Anne was mine before it was ours. Not legally. Exactly. But spiritually. I bought it as a tired 1920s box with bad wiring, sloped floors, and a basement that smelled like wet cardboard. I spent 2 years turning it into 420 square feet of quiet order. Cedar, glass, steel, and windows angled just right, so the Space Needle looked less like a tourist attraction and more like part of the weather. Lila had wanted Bellevue, or maybe Madison Park. On difficult days, she said Clyde Hill with the wounded tone of a person who believed geography was a form of justice. She wanted a house with a gate, a wine fridge, and neighbors who used the word summer as a verb. I wanted a place that held light in the morning and did not pretend to be larger than it was. We compromised by not compromising, which is a thing married people do when they are tired of fighting. 9 years. That was the number I kept returning to before I knew there would be other numbers. 9 years of her leaving coffee cups on windowsills. 9 years of her buying lamps that looked better in the store. 9 years of her singing half a song and never knowing the second verse. You do not erase 9 years because one fact becomes ugly. But you do start checking the measurements. Sunday morning was when the first measurement failed. Day 2. After she came home, Lila had gone to brunch with Amanda Bennett in Capitol Hill. The kind of brunch that begins with mimosas and ends with someone saying they deserve a reset. I stayed home, changed the sheets, put on towels, and emptied the guest bathroom trash. Because adulthood is mostly doing unromantic things while pretending they are not evidence. It was wrapped in a paper towel and pushed beneath the cardboard tube from the toilet paper roll. Deliberate, but not careful enough. I pulled it out slowly. The way you pull back drywall when you already suspect water damage. 2 pink lines. Clean. Confident. No ambiguity. I stood in the small guest bathroom of my own house and stared at a pregnancy test that belonged to my wife. Then I did the math. Lila and I had not been together for almost 4 weeks before she left. Not because of a fight. Not because of some dramatic collapse. Just because distance had become one more room in the house. She was gone 11 days. She had been home too. A home test turning positive then did not point to Queen Anne. It pointed straight across the country to Key West. I did not break the mirror. I did not yell at the sink. I did not sit on the tile and become the man in the movie who finally understands the plot. I took 3 photos of the test. The result window, the brand, and the expiration date on the wrapper she had forgotten to tear off. Then I wrapped it exactly the way I found it. pushed it back under the cardboard tube, and finished folding the towels. I called my brother Owen from Kerry Park that afternoon. I walked there because the view makes Seattle look manageable. Like if you stand high enough above a city, your life will organize itself out of embarrassment. Owen answered on the third ring and said, "You are outside. That is never good." I asked why. He said, "Because when you are fine, you text. When something is broken, you seek elevation." I told him everything. The trip, the kiss at the airport, the test, the timeline. I told it in order, because order was the only thing I still had. Owen was quiet long enough that I could hear wind moving through the trees behind me. Finally, he said, "Are you sure?" I said. "I design load-bearing systems for hospitals and bridges. Being sure is what people pay me for." "Do you know who?" he asked. I looked down at the city, at the ferries moving through Elliott Bay like slow white stitches. "I have a name," I said. "I am not ready to say it yet." "Why not?" "Because once I say it, it becomes real. And if it becomes real, I have to decide what kind of man I am going to be." Owen exhaled. "You are the only person I know who treats a betrayal like a seismic inspection. Seismic inspections keep buildings standing." I said. He did not laugh. That was how I knew he was worried. The name was Cole Bennett. I had met Cole 3 years earlier at Amanda and Lila's holiday party in Bellevue. He was the sort of man who entered a room already expecting applause. Big watch, bigger teeth, laugh loud enough to make waiters blink. He owned 2 restaurants, a rooftop bar, and a development company with a polished website that used the word visionary more often than any functioning adult should. Amanda was his wife. She was clever, generous, and had the dry patience of a woman who had spent too many years explaining her husband to other people. Lila and Amanda were close, which meant Cole was always around the edges of our life. At dinners, charity auctions, Mariners games, rooftop tastings, and every event where people pretended networking was friendship, I had watched Cole lean too close when he talked to Lila. I had seen her laugh at jokes that were not strong enough to support laughter. I had noticed the small things and interpreted them kindly, because love is a terrible building inspector when it wants a structure to pass. That was not stupidity. It was trust wearing the wrong uniform. Monday morning, I called Dr. My 11 from the parking garage under my office in South Lake Union. She was an obstetrician I knew through a clinic project my firm had completed 2 years earlier. I asked the question carefully, without names and without drama. If a woman took a home pregnancy test 2 days after returning from an 11-day trip, and there had been no intimacy with her, what would the likely conception window be? Dr. Levin was silent for one professional second. Then she said, "Home tests can be positive around 10 days after conception. Sometimes a little earlier depending on sensitivity, but the cleaner answer is this. Your timeline would make the trip very relevant." I thanked her. She said, "I am sorry, Ethan." I told her not to be. I was still gathering information, and information does not need sympathy yet. After that, I called Miriam Shaw. Miriam had practiced family law in Seattle for 28 years, and her office near Pioneer Square had no family photographs, no inspirational quotes, and one fern that looked like it had signed a non-disclosure agreement. I had used her once for a business partner's divorce referral. She remembered me immediately. "Ethan Mercer," she said. "Please tell me you are calling about a client." I said, "I wish I was." She paused. "How bad?" I said. "Potentially structural." Miriam sighed. "Not unkindly. Engineers and architects are the only people who describe heartbreak like an inspection report. Come in Thursday at 8. Bring everything. Do not confront her. Do not threaten anyone. Do not touch accounts without advice. And Ethan, keep acting normal until we know where the floor is. There is a particular cruelty in waiting. Once you know the shape of the disaster, the house does not change. The coffee maker still clicks at 6:15. The mail still comes through the slot. Your wife still asks if you want the last piece of toast. But everything has been relabeled in your head. A smile becomes pressure. A pause becomes load. A closed door becomes a wall you suddenly remember was never on the original plan. For 13 days, I became 2 men. One man answered emails. reviewed beam calculations, corrected junior engineers, and nodded through client calls about budget overruns. The other man stood inside his own marriage with a flashlight, marking every crack in blue tape. I did not enjoy it. People imagine cold revenge feels powerful. It does not. It feels like staying awake during surgery because someone has to make sure the doctor removes the right thing. Acting normal turned out to be a profession of its own. Monday night. Lila made pasta and talked about Amanda's new obsession with Venetian plaster. She moved around the kitchen with a brightness that did not reach her hands. Cole found this amazing interior guy. She said, "He's doing a restaurant in Ballard too." I said, "Good for Cole." Her spoon hit the side of the pan once. She knew I did not like him. "You should eat before it gets cold," she said. I said, "I should." "So yate." She poured wine. I declined. She asked if I was tired. I said work was busy. We sat at the table I had built from old Douglas fir beams and performed marriage like a play in an empty theater. No applause. No witnesses. Just two people saying ordinary words over a cracked foundation. On Tuesday, I told my business partner, Vivian Cho. Vivian and I had started Mercer Cho Engineering 12 years earlier with 2 laptops, 1 unpaid invoice, and the unreasonable confidence of people who had not yet learned how hard payroll can be. She was sharp where I was patient, direct where I was diplomatic, and allergic to men who confused expensive cologne with leadership. We were alone in the conference room after 6. To the office quiet except for the HVAC and the faint hum of traffic on Mercer Street. I told her about the test, the timeline, and Cole Bennett. Vivian did not interrupt once, which was rare enough to qualify as a weather event. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Cole Bennett," as in Pierline Ballard Cole Bennett. Pierline Ballard was his big play. A waterfront food hall, boutique hotel, and event space near the ship canal, wrapped in enough renderings to make investors forget the permitting headaches. For 7 months, Cole had been courting our advisory group and 2 private investors to come in as lead money. The term sheet was unsigned. The due diligence folder was sitting on Vivian's desk. I said, "The same Cole." Vivian tapped her pen against the table. "How long do you need?" I said. "Until next Sunday." She nodded once. Then due diligence becomes very slow, painfully slow, professionally slow. I said, "Thoroughness is not revenge." She smiled without warmth. "No, it is a virtue with paperwork." On Thursday afternoon, I went to the Ballard site with Vivian. Cole was there in a navy vest with his logo stitched over the heart, though I doubted the heart was the part doing most of his decision-making. He clapped me on the shoulder, talked about maritime heritage, artisan seafood, and the future of hospitality in Seattle. Lila's name sat in my mouth the entire time like a nail I refused to bite down on. Cole asked if we were still excited. I looked at the cracked pavement, the old warehouse wall, the water beyond the fence, and the renderings he had propped on easels like promises. I said, "Excitement is easy. Confidence takes longer." He laughed because he thought I was negotiating. I smiled because I knew he was standing on a floor he had weakened himself. Thursday morning. Miriam Shaw looked through my notes, the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray. She did not gasp. She did not perform outrage. Good lawyers save theater for court and use oxygen for facts. "You have a positive test," she said. "You have a timeline. You have suspicion. You do not have paternity. You do not have a confession. You do not have permission to burn your own life down just to warm your hands." I told her I was not interested in fire. I was interested in a controlled removal. Miriam looked up over her glasses. "Explain that before I bill you for poetry." So I explained the Ballard deal, Cole's 7 months of lunches, site walks, investor dinners, and glossy promises. I explained that his project needed our credibility more than it needed our money. She listened with her pen still. At the end, she said, "So he wanted your signature on a project while possibly sleeping with your wife. That is an impressive appetite." I said, "He seems like a man who does not read warning labels." Miriam almost smiled. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want Lila's life to look like after this?" I looked out her window at a delivery truck blocking half of First Avenue while everyone behind it honked as if sound could move steel. I want her safe, I said. I want her solvent. I want the house settled fairly. I do not want cruelty for entertainment. But I also will not help her lie to me. Miriam wrote that down. Then she said, "That is the first decent answer I have heard this month." Day 8. Lila grew careless. Or maybe comfort looks careless from the outside. She took calls on the back deck, with the door shut even when it was cold. She slept with her phone face down. She laughed at texts before remembering she was in the room with me. I never touched her phone. I did not need to. Patterns talk. You just have to stop interrupting them. That night she said, "Amanda and Cole might come by next Sunday. Just a casual dinner." Would that be weird? I looked up from the sink. Weird, she shrugged. I know Cole gets on your nerves. I dried my hands. Invite them. I said, "It would be nice." She studied my face for a crack. I gave her none. Relief softened her shoulders. That was her mistake. She confused calm with ignorance. Friday afternoon. The evidence arrived in the most Cole Bennett way possible through his own sloppiness. Vivian called me into her office and placed a printed expense schedule on the desk. It had come from Cole's team as part of the Peerline due diligence package. Page 42. Travel and hospitality reimbursements. Key West. 3 nights at a guest house. 2 names attached to 1 room charge. Cole Bennett. L. Mercer. There are moments when the world does not shatter. It simply clicks into the shape you feared. I looked at the page for maybe 10 seconds. Vivian said, "I am sorry." I said, "Print 2 copies." Then I went back to my office, closed the door, and sat without moving until the lights in the building turned themselves on. I called Miriam. She said, "That is still not paternity proof, but it is enough to stop pretending this is just math." "Do you want to proceed?" I said yes. She said, "If you authorize it, we can file this afternoon and start the statutory clock. Temporary terms will be drafted. No theatrics. No threats." I said, "Understood." Then I called Owen and told him the name. He said only one thing. "Do you need a place to sleep?" I said. "Not yet." He said, "I will make the couch anyway." Saturday was ordinary in the cruel way. Saturdays can be in week. Lila went to the market, bought tulips, and asked whether salmon or chicken would be better for dinner with Amanda and Cole. I said salmon. She said Cole hates salmon. I said then chicken. She did not hear the joke. Or maybe she heard it and had no safe place to put it. I spent that afternoon in the basement, not hiding, packing Lila's winter coats, her art books, the boxes of holiday ornaments she had chosen and I had carried down every January. I labeled each box by room and contents. I did not throw away her things. I did not break a frame. Destruction is not the same as power. Anyone can make a mess. It takes discipline to end a life neatly. Sunday morning, I made one careful call. Not to Cole, not to Lila, to Amanda's sister, Rachel, in Kirkland. I kept it brief and factual. I said I had documents involving Cole and Lila, and Amanda deserved to receive them from someone who loved her. I offered to send them to Rachel's personal email and to Miriam as a record of delivery. Rachel was quiet, then said, "Send it." I did not ask what Amanda would do. That was not my decision. Innocent people do not owe betrayed people the convenience of timing. Amanda deserved the truth before she walked into my house and ate chicken across from the man who had turned both our marriages into collateral damage. By 4 that afternoon, the house was ready. Not empty. Not dramatic. Ready? Lila's things were boxed in the entry and dining room. 14 boxes total, labeled in black marker with a precision that would have been funny, if anything about it had been funny. Her clothes, her books, her pottery, her candles, the unopened key lime candy from Florida. Everything that was clearly hers. Everything that was no longer ours. At 5:15, her car pulled into the driveway. She came in first, smiling down at her phone, carrying a bottle of white wine and a bakery bag from Madison Valley. She made it 3 steps before the smile fell off her face. The door stayed open behind her. Cold air moved across the floor. She looked at the boxes, then at me sitting at the dining table in my jacket, Hands folded. "Ethan," she said. It came out small. "Close the door," I said. "The heat is on." She closed it slowly, as if moving slowly could change what she had already seen. "What is this?" she asked. I said, "An organized transition. Kitchen items are by the stairs. Clothes are by the closet door. The boxes near the bookshelf are mixed because after 9 years some ownership gets blurry." I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Her eyes moved around the room, counting, failing to count. "Are you leaving me?" she asked. I said, "No, I already left. This is just the part where you notice." She put the wine on the sideboard with both hands because one hand was no longer steady. "Ethan, whatever you think happened." I interrupted gently. "Sit down, Leila." She sat because some part of her still believed conversation could be architecture, that words could hold up what actions had already cut through. I opened the folder and placed 3 papers on the table. First, the photo of the pregnancy test. She stared at it and went pale in a way I will not describe further. Some private wreckage deserves walls, even when the house is gone. Second, the filing confirmation from Miriam Shaw's office. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed Friday afternoon at 3:42. Washington gives the process its own clock, and that clock had already started because I did not need permission to admit the marriage was broken. Her fingers moved toward the paper, then stopped. Third, page 42 from Cole Bennett's due diligence package. Travel and hospitality reimbursements. Key West. 1 room. Cole Bennett. El Mercer. The silence after she read it was so complete, I heard the refrigerator cycle on in the kitchen. Outside, a bus groaned up the hill. The city kept going, which felt rude and correct. "How did you get that?" she whispered. "From Cole," I said. "Technically from his finance team. He sent it to my firm because he wanted my money." She closed her eyes. "Ethan," I said, "I am going to ask you one question, and you should understand that lying now will not save anything. Is the baby his?" Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was enough. The wine bottle sat between us like something brought to the wrong funeral. She said, "I was going to tell you." I said, "No, you were going to wait until the math became foggy enough to walk through a brood. That is different." She put a hand over her stomach. Not protective exactly. More like she had just remembered her body was part of the evidence. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. There was no anger in it. Just the sudden, practical fear of a person standing in a room that used to be home. I said, "Amanda's house is not an option." She looked at me then. Really looked. The meaning arrived in pieces. Confusion first, then dread, then the knowledge that the room was much larger than she had understood. "What did you do?" she asked. I said, "I did not do anything to Amanda. I sent documents to her sister because Amanda deserved to make her own decisions before she sat at my table tonight." My phone buzzed. I turned it so Lila could see Owen's text. "Amanda knows. Cole is outside her house yelling into his phone. Want me to come over?" Lila read it twice. She whispered, "Oh my God." I said, "That is one way to summarize it." Then I stood and picked up my keys. "The Pierline Ballard project," I said, "is also having a difficult evening. Our advisory group withdrew Friday. Formal notice. Undisclosed personal conflict. Courtesy copies to the 2 investors who were waiting for our lead position. Nothing defamatory. Nothing emotional. Just clean professional distance." Leila stared at me. "Cole is going to lose the deal." I said, "Cole may lose the deal. Deals are living things. They survive if the foundation is sound. This one had hidden cracks." She shook her head. "You planned this?" I said, "I measured this." Planning came later. That was the first time she cried. Not soft crying. Not pretty crying. The kind that folds a person inward. I did not move to comfort her. And that was the cruelest thing I did all night. Maybe the only cruel thing. My hands stayed at my sides. I had spent 9 years knowing the exact shape of her pain. I knew how to fix it. I chose not to. Because some pain is not mine to repair. I said, "You can stay here through temporary orders. Miriam will contact you about terms. You will have access to the joint account for normal expenses. The car is yours. I will not make you unstable, but I will not be your cover story. The house will be handled fairly. The dining table stays with me. I built it. She looked at the table, then at the boxes, then at me. I am so sorry, she said. I know, I said, and I did know, sorry, was present in the room. It just had no authority. Regret can testify, but it cannot reverse an engineering failure. The doorbell rang then. We both turned toward it. For 1 second, absurdly, I thought it might be Cole. It was not. It was Amanda. She stood on the porch, without makeup, holding a folder in one hand and her wedding ring in the other. Behind her, the sky had gone that blue Seattle gets when the day is over, but the rain has not decided what it wants to be. Lila stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. Amanda did not look at her first. She looked at me. Thank you, she said, and her voice was broken cleanly in half. I nodded once. Then Amanda turned to Lila. The two women looked at each other across my entryway, and 9 years of brunches, birthdays, shared secrets, and borrowed dresses collapsed without making a sound. I did not stay for that conversation. It was not mine. I picked up the overnight bag I had packed that morning and stepped around the boxes. Lila said my name. Ethan. I stopped at the door but did not turn fully around. Who built you a better life than this? I asked quietly. Not as an accusation. As a measurement. She did not answer. Measurements do not require agreement. I walked down the porch steps into the cold and got into my truck. Owen lived in Wallingford, 15 minutes away, if traffic was kind, and 25, if Seattle wanted to remind you who was in charge. I drove with the window cracked, past the hill lights, past coffee shops still open, past couples, walking dogs in rain jackets. I did not look back. I had already inspected the structure. It was not safe to occupy. 3 weeks later, Cole called the office 6 times. Vivian remained in a meeting for all 6 calls, which was impressive because 2 of those meetings were with a sandwich. 5 weeks later, Amanda filed for divorce. Her attorney, by coincidence or by the universe enjoying symmetry, was Miriam Shaw. 8 weeks later, Pearline Ballard lost its second investor after routine due diligence turned up unpaid contractor claims and 2 tax liens. Cole had somehow forgotten to mention, I did not make a call about that. I did not need to. Men like Cole think consequences are personal because they have never respected systems, permits, contracts, marriages, trust. They all look like paperwork until one missing signature stops the whole machine. Lila had the baby the following summer. Ah boy, I learned that from Owen, who learned it from Amanda, who had learned it from a mutual friend because pain, like water, finds channels. I did not ask for pictures. I did not ask about Cole. I hoped the child was healthy. I meant that a baby is not a betrayal. Adults are. I sold the Queen Anne house the next spring. Not because I hated it, because I had built it for a version of my life that no longer existed, and I have never believed in forcing a structure to serve a purpose it was not designed for. I bought a smaller place in West Seattle, just above the ferry line, with bad floors, good bones, and morning light that arrived like it had nowhere else to be. I rebuilt it slowly, one room at a time. New joists in the kitchen, better windows in the bedroom, a desk facing east, a table I made from salvaged maple, not as beautiful as the old one yet, but honest. The first morning I drank coffee there, I realized the house was quiet in a way that did not accuse me of anything. I still have the photo of the pregnancy test, not on display, not in a drawer I open on purpose. It sits folded behind the permits for the West Seattle remodel, a record of the day I stopped trusting a structure because I finally saw where the load had shifted. Not a trophy, not a wound, a measurement. Every life has a foundation. Sometimes you inherit it, sometimes you pour it yourself, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit the ground beneath you is moving. Step out before the roof comes down, and build again somewhere stronger. If you made it to the end, subscribe to Dad's Silent Justice. A lot of people listen and never press the button, but it helps more than you know. And comment where you are listening from, because sometimes the coldest justice travels the farthest.